back to the Daily Poem here on the Close Reads Podcast Network. I'm David Kern. Today's poem is in keeping with our ongoing series here, our ongoing Christmas series. It is from Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, In Memoriam, one of the most famous poems ever written. This is quite a long poem, and I'm just going to read a section of it. In Memoriam was published in 1850, the year that Tennyson was appointed poet laureate. It is about his friend, Arthur Henry Hallam, who died at the age of 22, and Tennyson was very close to him. And Hallam happened to be his sister's fiance as well, for what it's worth. This is a section of that In Memoriam poem that is related to Christmas, and it goes by the name Ring Out Wild Bells. I'll read it first and then offer a couple of comments. And this is the section labeled CVI, or that's 106 in Roman numerals. And that's the section from In Memoriam. Ring out, wild bells, to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out, wild bells, and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that hear we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride and place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. According to a story that is told in multiple places on the internet, I think Wikipedia has a nice little summary of it, but the bells that are referenced in this poem come from Waltham Abbey, which is in Essex in London. And the story goes that around New Year's Eve time, Tennyson heard those bells and was inspired to add this to In Memoriam. And apparently, this is at least interesting in terms of understanding the poem a little bit. Apparently, the bells are rung with a little bit of a muffled sound to them to symbolize or to ring out the death of the old year. And then those muffles are taken off, and there's a more fuller sound, a more free sound that marks and rings in the new year. According to Wikipedia, certain people who tell this story of Tennyson hearing these bells say that it was a very cold night, but then some people think that would have been unlikely given the way they had to ring the bells. So you can do some research on that if you want, but that's a little bit of interesting background. This is one of those poems that I think is a great example of the way form can be freeing, or at least the way form can be profoundly influential in terms of the way a poem is experienced. So this is a poem that begins many of its lines with at least the word ring, but especially, ring out or ring in. The first and fourth lines of the first stanza, the first, second, and fourth lines of the second stanza, the first, third, and fourth of the second stanza, the first and third of the fourth stanza, the first, third, and really the fourth of the fifth stanza. Then in the sixth stanza, 3 of the 4, the seventh stanza, all 4, and then the last stanza, 3 of the 4. So that's a lot of lines that end with begin with the same words. And then, of course, there's a somewhat strict, or at least restricting, I suppose, rhyme scheme as well, an ABBA rhyme scheme for each stanza. But it doesn't feel restrictive, right? It doesn't feel as if it's trapped in the form, or as if it's boring. Nor does it feel kitschy or overly formal, if you will. The form seems so freeing, and in a way it makes it seem formal, and that suits a poem that is part of an elegy to a friend who has died, but it also suits the occasion of Christmas, and it makes it seem like a call and response almost, which I love. I love the sort of ecclesiastical overtones of a call and response type thing, a type poem. And I think that the way he does that is really interesting. And I don't know that I'm not saying he intended that, but that's the echo that it creates for me, is the call and response of a church service. But it also creates something very musical, and it mimics, the repeat of the line "ring out." It mimics the repeated sounds, the repeated rhythms of bells that are going back and forth, back and forth. You can't see my hand, but right now I'm kind of making the motion of bells going back and forth over and over again, and it kind of settles into that rhythm, into that pattern that then creates the noise that they make. And then that's one of the things that make bells so lovely and such a symbol of, I think, the Christian church. With that, I won't try to overinterpret any of that, but those are just some observations that I have of this poem. So here, once again, is Tennyson's "Ring Out Wild Bells" from In Memoriam. Ring out, wild bells, to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out, wild bells, and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going. Let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that hear we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out, my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. This has been the Daily Poem. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with another one.